Hey everybody, welcome to part two of the Knuckles painting process. I want to say a quick apology for the last video. If you heard a bunch of noises, it's because I'm sitting in a leather chair, and when I fidget in this chair, you can hear it. So right now I'm sitting on a blanket, so hopefully this part two doesn't suffer from the same audio issues. But yeah, the rest of this whole painting process is going to pretty much be done in Photoshop. I will do some more stuff in Krita, but essentially everything's going to happen here in Photoshop, texturing everything. I hop back and forth a little bit uh, just to kind of get ahead of that. A lot of the things that are compatible with like certain other programs like Clip Studio aren't compatible with Krita, so you can't really take a Photoshop file, bring it over into Krita, and maintain all your clipping masks, maintain all your adjustment layers, that sort of thing. Doesn't really work. So just to put this out there, in case I forget to mention it, whenever I do anything in Krita on top of this, like I do a paint over, that is all done on a flattened PSD. So I flatten my file and then I create a new file. And then that new file is essentially just one for a full paint over. So the full paint over will then be moved over into Krita. I'll paint up whatever necessary adjustments I need to make. And then when I hop back over into Photoshop, I have a whole layer on that paint over PSD that I will then transfer over onto my final fully intact layered PSD with all my adjustment layers. I just kind of transfer over that whole paint over. So that's how I'm doing that. That's how I get around working in Krita for some of my final painting bits, especially on like a huge layered PSD because yeah, it just doesn't really work perfectly when you're transitioning back and forth, which is fine. I mean, it's no big deal. It takes a couple seconds, and painting in Krita is just it's very quick for me. So I always think it's worth it to just utilize the best tools in each program to speed up my process best I can. And that's what I'll do in this process. So you'll see that coming up towards the end of this. I kind of move back and forth, and I do that a couple times. So yeah, that's what's happening there. And yeah, we'll get right into this video. All right, so let's get into it. So I'm continuing from where I left off in the last video. I was talking about having used the chalk brush for a lot of blending. This is a brush that I kind of used in previous processes, I think. I think I used this in, well, I used a version of this brush in that Gundam painting I did of the Zaku, like when I was rendering out all the metal there. I use this brush there a lot. It's basically just a chalk brush, 80% opacity, 14% flow. It has this nice like gradual kind of blend to it. You can run the risk of overdoing it with this type of brush where you start to kind of like flatten everything out a bit. So I'm trying to, because the flow is so low, I'm trying to make it so that the opacity of my brush strokes isn't so much that it totally destroys the values beneath it. So brushes like that are kind of what I'm after. Brushes they add a painted feel, they blend things, but they don't totally negate the work that you've done up to this point. So I use a lot of brushes like that, which is like the same idea as that watercolor one that you saw me using in Clip Studio. It just kind of adds to what you've done rather than, erase things sitting beneath it, which is not at all what I'm after because I do like the values that I've built up. So I'm just reinforcing areas where like lines are. I'm trying to make sure that the forms are reading distinctly from one another. If I can kind of reinforce areas and sell shapes better and values, then that's kind of what I'm looking to do here. So you can see me kind of building up those forms more around Knuckles' brow, things like that. I'm just like always identifying parts that could read a bit better and further working those out. I've had a lot of people ask a question of like, how do you know when something's done? And I think there's definitely an instinct to that of like when you prefer it, to be done. But like it's really, you know, eye of the beholder type of thing. Like whatever you feel comfortable with. Because like to me, this would have been done a couple of years ago, right? Like I would have just kept it like this. But I honestly find that I answer that question for myself more and more by breaking that rule. It's like going past the point of what I believe is done and just trying to see what else I can do. And if I do too much and it looks bad, then I know to pull back on that. But I never really know when something's done until I've overdone something. I'm cleaning up the edges here using that same chalk brush. You remember what I did where I like selected outside of the character in that initial value render and then inverted that selection. That didn't leave like a perfect outline to the character. There's a lot of jagged bits. And especially like as you start to move into things looking a bit more painterly, you start to realize like, oh, right, this outline is too hard of an outline for it to blend with all of this implied stuff and painterly things that I'm doing. Like eventually I'm going to need to paint out some of the outlines and maybe lose some edges here and there and soften things. So the selection is great for like quick fills and getting all your colors in place, doing some basic rendering and things and adjustment layers and all that. But then once I have that all set up, I have to start to really incorporate it into the background and everything. Like a lot of people who watch me do these types of processes are surprised to kind of find out that like on those giant posters where there's a ton of characters, that I'm working on each character individually instead of like together as one giant composition the whole time. It's kind of the benefit of having a thumbnail where you sketch out all the colors that are going to be there and you've placed characters, you have the composition done. You can always refer back to that to see where each piece of the puzzle is going to fit in the grand scheme of things so that you understand where your lighting's going and your colors and all that sort of stuff. But for me, I like isolating each separate section because I can do so much to adjust and render things up and make it look done and then incorporate it into the final and then paint it all together. But working on like big projects where you have a bunch of different characters, I honestly find it a bit too overwhelming to work them all up at the same time. And even when I'm painting it, just to see like 7 different characters in a composition and know the road that lies ahead with that, I just find that to be it's just a bit too much for me personally. Like I can't see the bits and pieces I'm working on. Like I won't, if I see everything together in a composition, I won't typically spend enough time on each individual asset of that whole broader composition. I kind of just hop around too much and I don't invest enough time into the individual pieces and work them all up to a high level render. So to get around that, I isolate them all and I work them up like this. Even though this is just a singular character, this clipping mask way I'm doing it and the way I render up, using the yellow tones and all that and build up my values, like I do that even on those giant compositions with like, 20 plus characters, because otherwise I just find it all too unmanageable. And if you're like me and you kind of have the seeming sense of dread when you see giant images that you have to complete, it's nice to give yourself a bit of tunnel vision and focus on one part at a time. Because when you're working, like if you're always thinking about the big picture at all times, I think you kind of lose focus on the steps to get to your goal. Like I find it much easier to concentrate on step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Like if those steps are characters in a composition. Like that's kind of how I like to think about it. I like to kind of plan my attack and know that I've finished 25% of the puzzle that I'm putting together. Like that's much more doable. Like that feels like a goal I can accomplish rather than this nebulous goal of giant illustration. It's like, oh God, that's so overwhelming. That's too much to do. Yeah, I try to make it as easy for myself as possible. Because then at the end, once you plug everything in together and you work up all the colors, it's like, wow, everything comes together. Feels good. It feels like you did a ton of work, even though you weren't thinking of the whole composition, all together like that, the entire time you were working on it. Yeah, it makes larger projects less intimidating for sure. So, just in this whole process, you're going to be seeing I'm using the chalk brush, blending around. I'm mainly using the chalk brush because I like the way that it looked in smoothing out areas. When I did the initial Sonic the Hedgehog, I did the Sonic 2 poster, which, by the way, it's officially licensed by Sega now, which is pretty cool. So I'm a real Sonic artist. I got the seal of approval. But anyway, I like the way that rendering looks. So I'm just using the same approach here with that chalk brush. It's just a simple way of doing it. There's, like I said previously, there's certain things it doesn't do as well where I want to make sure that I do some of the more painterly things I've been interested in lately with the kind of like sketchier dry brush looks so that I incorporate that as well. But yeah, again, trying to work through G Fuel and not get too much of an anxiety attack. I didn't drink it for like months, and now I just have a surplus of the things from when I worked with them. Great clients though. Sent me a fridge. I will never use that fridge. It's a Super Meat Boy mini refrigerator. It doesn't have good temperature control. That thing gets to basically freezer temperatures right away. It is not a regular fridge. Everything got frozen in that thing. I used it when our refrigerator died randomly. We had to replace it. Yeah, further reinforcing forms here. That's that's really it. It's like always trying to sell the forms and the depth and everything. The more I can do that, the more successful the illustration is going to be. The more I can refine those drop shadows, the more I can convey a convincing space. So, separation of objects like his little tendrils of hair, whatever they're called, his dreadlocks. I don't know what they are, but his head pieces, his spikes. Just creating some separation of the forms is great. By the way, all of this rendering is a clipping mask. This is all on top of the initial fill layer. I mean, you can see it in the layer stack on the right there, that they're all attached to that base layer. So that's what I'm doing. I'll eventually break away from that, but for now, I'm still rendering within that space, which just helps keep everything nice and tidy. I'm not, worried about painting outside the lines or anything, losing my forms, the overall shape of the character, those hard edges. And one character or one thing from Sonic that I would like to do, but doesn't really have too much of an audience, is do a Sonic Triple Trouble. I loved that game when I was a kid. That was like my big. Well, I got a Game Gear secondhand from somewhere. I can't remember where exactly I got it from. And the only game I wanted was Sonic Triple Trouble. And that game had some incredible music, really cool character, the really cool enemy, that purple fox dude. I forget his name, Nash or something like that. yeah, that was awesome. I'd love to do something for that, but I don't think there's enough of an audience for that game. I'm using the dry brush, by the way, to paint in some highlights. It's going for some kind of white highlights here, a little bit light pink, and I'm just sketching it in there with this brush at 100% opacity. But I adjust this brush in the, if you go into the brush settings and you click to, I think it's like, is it transfer? I think it's transfer. And in transfer, you can adjust the, actually, let me look at it before I say anything further. I'm going to pause this. Let me actually open up Photoshop right now so that I'm not just bullshitting you. I'm opening it up while we record this. Apologies for the screen standing completely still right now. If I go to my brush settings here, yes, you go to transfer, and then because if you're, I'm stating this because there's a chance that you're when you open this brush in Photoshop, it won't have this setting locked in. For some reason, that's what happened to me when I imported my brushes again. Anyway, you go to transfer, and then underneath opacity jitter, there's the control. I have it set to pen pressure. And then on this particular brush, I have it all the way to the left to minimum. But you can you can adjust that to become more opaque with your brush strokes and finer, more detailed lines and things. I have two versions of this brush. One is for like spot highlights, and that's one where that slider is more central. It's like 40 or so percent. And that gives a harder line. And then the one that I have set to minimum is more for rendering and things. So that's the difference there. Anyway, let me close Photoshop and we'll get back to the knuckles painting here. So yeah, I'm using that brush, and you'll have that brush from the attachments here. And here I am painting out the boomerang shape on Knuckles' chest, making it look, ideally more like fur. So I'm just brushing out that edge with that dry brush. Whether or not that's the right decision, who knows? It was just something I decided to try out for this demo. See if I liked painting this echidna with some more furry textures. But in general, I like this dry brush for, painting over top my values a lot. Once I'm at this stage where all the colors are in place and everything, I find it's nice to add a bit of toothiness to it. But I find that this brush works best with more realistic stuff. So I can almost get like a, traditional look. I did it when I was working on those Diablo portraits that I posted up a while ago. So if you saw those, the Lilith I did and the Barbarian, those are pretty quick portraits. And one of the things I did in that process was use this dry brush looking brush to paint on top of and render everything. But I like the way that it looks. It ends up making, like, if you go over those more like detailed characters with lots of little, planes in the face and scars and loose hairs and just kind of like scraggly looking people, especially in Diablo for that vibe. This brush works really great for that. Oh, this is where I started fucking with the mouth. This goes through a weird phase. I remember working on this and being like, why did I do that? So I think what I was doing is I was looking at some of the artwork and the reference, and I was like, maybe Knuckles could have like a, more of an angry expression. But then I can't help but be like, come on, go back to the old Genesis Knuckles and give him that lighthearted little smirk, even if he is a bad guy or if he looks bad. Don't fuck with that. keep it the same. So I did backtrack on that. So playing with the edges of shadows there, I'll do that a lot just because I want to make sure that all of this is reading well. Like as a cast shadow gets further away from the object that's casting that shadow, the edges will get softer. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind when you're rendering around. So as like if you look directly under his like chin area, his neck, that cast shadow going across his chest, it should soften out as it gets towards the edge there. It should go like from a hard line to a soft line to the edge of the character. So it's always a good idea to play with that to create convincing depth in your paintings. It's very nice that this, even considering that I was trying to keep a lot of things in mind throughout this recording, that it still took under 5 hours to do it. Felt pretty good. Made me happy. I'm definitely going to stick to this process. And as always with this sort of thing, if I figure out anything new, then I'm going to, include it in another process video. But for now, this is a tried and true approach that I've been using for everything, and I haven't found really like a limit to it. I honestly feel like I've just done my best work with it so far, which is really nice. I can get a whole broad range of styles doing this. It's a nice feeling to break through and find something that works. I don't feel like I'm struggling so much to knock things out. My last tried and true approach that worked every time was my Clip Studio watercolor brush approach. This is just a better version of that essentially. But that version where I painted everything up in Clip Studio and did all that, like it looked fine, but it definitely had a very specific kind of cartoony flat look to it, which was fine on its own, and it worked particularly well for characters like Venom and Carnage and gooey characters and things with sharp highlights and whatever. But it's not something that covers all your bases, that's for sure. Like if you want to get into painting like Rembrandt, you're not going to use that approach. Then I could definitely do more traditional looking paintings using the approach I currently use. So I've at least covered that ground. I felt a bit pigeonholed before into like a certain aesthetic, which if you really enjoy your style and that's your look, then that's fine. But for me, I didn't. I kind of just stumbled into that look and kept it because it worked. And I was trying to find new ways of, covering more ground with other styles and things. And I didn't feel like I could do it all with that one approach. I needed to switch it up and find something else that was equally dependable. And that was a long road for me. That was months, journeying for, I don't know, probably like another year of just nonstop pushing to find new approaches. And I get like little bits and pieces of it here and there. Like that Ginyu force that I did, that was pretty close to where I wanted to be. And that's why I was going to have that one be a process video. But I decided against it because I was like, well, it's fine, but it's not ideal. It's not exactly what I want. Like some of that stuff was a bit of a struggle to get to come together. But this, on the other hand, this is fine. This works. That's my number one thing with not, like if I ever delay a video, or if you ever hear me say like this one's going to be the process one and then it doesn't end up being that one, it's because I just have a feeling in my gut like this isn't it. And I hate putting something out there like trust this and then going back on it like right away in my own personal stuff. and be like, well, that's not actually my process. That's just, I wanted to make a video and I wanted something to exist with this approach recorded, but it's not something I'm super confident in. That's not a good feeling for me. So I was trying not to do that with Ginyu Force. So now I have this approach, which I've been using for clients for a few, well, how long has it been? Maybe like 2.5 months, 2 months, maybe 2 months is better. Something like that. But I've had so many different ways of working. And like I did this giant Lord of the Rings poster, but it's 9 cards for Magic the Gathering composed into one giant poster. So you can break it up into 9 pieces to have it all work compositionally together and individually. But that one was such a pain in the ass. That was in my I don't know what I'm doing phase. And I winged that so hard. Ended up with like, I mean, I can see the clear divides and where stuff's working, where it's not working. I don't think everybody can, but I can. So like when I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh, there's like 6 different styles in here that don't go together. Oh, here I am in Krita again. This is that thing I talked about where I flattened out my layers. You can see in the layers on the right what I did. I flattened my knuckles layer, and then I have the 2 circular layers beneath that, and I believe I lock them and then paint in there just to give some like detail to the background. But yeah, this is me just kind of adding in some like highlights and things. And honestly, every time I hop back into Krita after being in Photoshop, it's like my speed just goes up so ridiculously high, and I can just fly through rendering an image. Like I don't know what the fuck's going on with Photoshop. Like I wish it felt the same as some of these other programs. And I know people feel that way about like Procreate and whatnot, where they're just like, oh, this is way easier. Where's the desktop version? You always hear that. But for me, that's like this sort of thing where I'm like, God, this feels great. Painting in Krita, drawing and painting in Photoshop. I mean, in a Clip Studio. So many great plus sides to that. Like I know not everybody feels like Photoshop is a hindrance. I wish I could understand that. I cannot. I don't see it that way. There's definitely pluses to it and big minuses. But when I see other artists who only work in Photoshop, I'm just like, my goodness, I wish I could show you the beauty of these other programs. I wish you would take the time to check them out and see what else is offered out there, because my goodness, there's a very large landscape of different things that you could do now. I was playing with doing a side light here just to make the most out of rendering out and defining Knuckles forms. This is before I decided to go for the lightning on the fists as the secondary light source. I mean, side lighting would have worked out fine, but I also think like a big chunk of that lighting there is because I didn't choose a background color, like it's just white. So, your character is going to look odd or strange in color choice dependent on the light source around them. So if they're sitting on a white background, part of your brain, if you're rendering stuff realistically, is thinking like, how come that big bright white background isn't affecting your character at all? Or at least that's how I think. So then subconsciously I'm like, oh, this isn't going to look right until I paint in that secondary white light into the shadows of this character. Otherwise it won't fit in this. It won't sit in that space comfortably. It's going to feel strange. that light's just doing nothing to your character. But once I add in a background color, you'll see how that changes. But yeah, that was like my major thing here. I'm just trying to figure out like how can I best emphasize all these shapes, make this character read really well. And I'm just painting things in and painting them out with the eraser on the same brush. I'm just trying to figure it out. Eventually, I believe that I kind of just go into rendering in the background. I think I just lock the blue circle in that background and just start painting there, and then do the same thing with the ring. But there's certain things I'm doing there. Like you can see I added a bit of a bounce light on his little tendrils of hair there, and then on the gloves. Like some of that stuff is helping to round out the character a bit better. Doesn't look half bad. Man, painting and figuring out painting is so fucking fun. It is so fun. I love painting. When it works. When it works. When you're in the abyss of trying to figure out what you're doing, then you don't love it so much. There were years where I didn't love it. Many years. Isn't that a crazy thing? I get that question, like when does it get easier, or how do you deal with um, artist block, all that, and burnout. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Like for the first 10 years, it was a struggle. It's even more than that. Probably painting wise, the first 15 years for me was that way. I just kept doing it because I am stubborn and I wanted it to work. I wanted to find my own voice, my own style, something that made me cool in the space and unique or something. But God, it takes so long. And it's such a pain in the ass, but you do it because you enjoy figuring things out. I always think like it's not about getting to some end point where I feel satisfied with this whole thing. I more think of it as like you have to be in love with the discovery and the process and learning and growing and improving. Like that has to be the thing that motivates you. Like even when I had no money, I was struggling and life was just extremely hard. Those breakthrough moments where I figured something out or I learned something new, it made it all worth it. And that was, even when I was broke, that was the most exciting part. It was just like, oh, I got this new thing, or oh my goodness, I know how one of my idols works, in a specific way in their process. I figured that out for myself. It's like that, those little breakthroughs that happen, I don't know, it makes it all worth it. And yeah, it's like I don't think about the struggle of how long it took me to get there because it's just something I really want to do. But it's not easy, but it's also enjoyable. So it's kind of hard. it's like, it's like if you really hate doing this stuff, it's like, my goodness, I don't know. I guess it's not for everybody. So this is me locking that blue circle layer and just using the Krita brush to create, painterly effects back there. Make it look like there's some wispy clouds or something. Adding in shadows and highlights on that ring as well. That's another locked layer. And then just further detailing out areas on Knuckles' forms. Anytime I get to go back into Krita and paint is a lot of fun. I played with having Knuckles be outlined like I did my Sonic the Hedgehog. I ended up not doing that because I just felt like it was kind of, I don't know, it wasn't meshing with it. I didn't feel. Not that you couldn't do an outline. It would still look okay, but for this particular style and how sharp he was already and how painterly he was in other parts, I just felt like it clashed a bit, so I didn't keep it. But it was an approach I played with here just to see if I liked it. Anyway, yeah, I just think like almost all the time I'm working, I'm in this sort of mindset, like I'm talking to you, like I'm just trying to figure out how I got somewhere in a process or find my way to a new place. And that sense of discovery and growth and trying new things, like that's the number one motivator for me in art. Like I didn't even think about money really until having kids and saving up for a house. It's like before that, I just kind of, when it came to art, I did whatever it took to just make ends meet, pay the bills, and then outside of that, just have fun. Oh, this is me back in Photoshop. I'm going to move that paint over layer and I'm going to put it into the final file. I'm adjusting Knuckles here, doing some selective color adjustments, adjusting the yellows, getting a bit cyan, a little magenta, changing up the tones there, doing the white, adding in some blues and cyan there, and the neutral tones, just seeing what works. And I think that looks cool. And I'm color balancing the ring back there. Give it a bit more depth. Bump up the highlights, midtones. Same thing with the blue, just adjusting the colors. Get a bit more richness going on. But yeah, as I was saying before, money didn't really enter into my world really until I had to, start making money for family and life in general and making some moves. But I've always tried to just do things that were motivated by whatever I was feeling at the moment, like just creative things, like work on a book for a year, work on, a big client project for a chunk of time, or just invest time into personal projects and things. But I've learned in the past 2 years that if I work super hard, I can make a really good living, but that it makes me way less happier. It's not, it's like, sure, you can do that, but like, fuck. For all you, like, I feel bad. Like, I've gotten a taste of like what it feels like to only think about money for a year. And I really hate it. I'd rather have way less money than have more money and more responsibility and feel locked into a million different things. I don't know how people do it. I don't have that in me. I've never cared that much. Oh, now I'm making in background fill, trying to see what would look cool. Figured I would go with something dark to make the character pop. Go with a slightly complementary color to Knuckles, kind of greenish. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't planning on, just because I wanted to make this demo relatively quick, I wasn't planning on doing a very complicated illustration for this, just because I felt, I want to keep it brief, just so I can cover all the main points. So went for something real simple, reinforcing the circle graphic element behind Knuckles with a gradient that's a spotlight kind of gradient billowing out from that central point. Just a light to dark type of thing. And now I'm back in Krita after doing that, and I'm painting in on a new layer some of those lightning effects on Knuckles' fists. Again, all using the same painterly brush, that Sketching 2 Chrome Large brush, which is the painterly one as opposed to the Chrome Thin brush, which is the one that looks more like inks. The Chrome Thin brush, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this in the initial part of this video, but that brush, it really works best if you choose black as your sole color. If you, well, you can turn this off, but it has like a color jitter to it, where if you choose another color, you'll see like a whole oily rainbow sort of look. I think you can just turn that off, that like color jitter effect. But I don't really care to. It doesn't bother me. I don't use it for anything other than black anyway. But yeah, I use that inking brushes as a pure black, and then the other brush is my renderer. But you can see that you can get very sharp lines with this one too. You're not stuck to just broad painterly brush strokes. You can get very thin, fine, controlled lines. I think in Photoshop, when I'm trying to do this sort of thing and I use certain brushes, I'm like, does Photoshop even know that I have a tablet with like 8,000 levels of pressure sensitivity? Like, it feels like it can't do this. I don't know why. It feels like I can't do like a super fine line and then big broad brush strokes. It's like I still have to use my I still have to use my brush size adjustment like constantly, like go make it really fine, make it really big in order to get the effects that I want. Whereas this, it's like if I go real light on my brush strokes, like I can get these fine lines, and if I go larger, then I get really broad lines. But I just find that interesting. It's like it feels like it doesn't know the pressure sensitivity available in Photoshop. I mean, I like Photoshop for what it does, but for what it doesn't do, these other programs do, that real well. Any sort of drawing, really. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this lightning is kind of an afterthought. Like, I'm not going crazy on this. I'm not making it incredibly cool or anything. It's just a detail there so that I can mix it up and add a bit of visual interest to this Knuckles rather than him just holding up his fists and sitting there. Like, not that it like saves this and turns it into a complete illustration that's super cool or anything. It's just for the short amount of time that I was painting this, it's something. It's something to add a bit more character to it. And then I'm adding some of that pink light from the lightning onto Knuckles' face. It's going to be on his body and his eyes, his nose, like all that area. So you'll see just how that kind of makes it so that I can render out these forms. Add more depth there. All these lighting elements are great for making your characters pop. It's one of those things where you kind of have to keep in mind that you control your illustrations. Like sometimes if you're too locked into like a reference or realism, or like what you would believe realism to be, you kind of don't think of just adding fantasy lights that don't exist or make sense. So like if you're trying to best light a character in a dark space, Like there's actually really good commentary on this from some film Twitter account was talking about how there are scenes in I believe they used, what did they use? Stranger Things, something like that. There's basically a whole discussion about how modern movies have a very washed out, dark look to them, whereas like it's almost like treating realism a bit too literally and not lighting characters appropriately. So if you watch like the Lord of the Rings, and I believe this is what the Twitter account said, it was saying that the difference was that in these modern ones where they're in darkness, it's that they lean into that too much. Whereas if you see, like Frodo and Sam in Mordor in those movies, it's like, yeah, they're in total darkness, but they're lit appropriately and you can tell what's happening. Oftentimes, when I see certain illustrations, it's not everybody, it's not like people don't break this, but I've seen it enough where you have complete freedom in your paintings to kind of do whatever you want, but you're not lighting your characters to a point where you're best showing off what you want to show for like focal points, or even just like you can light half a character. Like if you want the emphasis to be on the upper part of their body lit up, right? And you want the lower half to be in shadow, you don't even have to show why. You can just be like, oh, off camera, from like if you're the viewer looking at this card, you can say, oh, off camera behind the viewer, there was a broken log and the light was hitting that log and then casting a shadow onto this character, and the rest of the light was lighting the character. Like you can do all kinds of creative things like that. You just have to keep in mind that you're in complete control of your illustration and take advantage of that. It's really important. I have to pause this. My nose is driving me nuts. I'll be back. Itchy nose situation is hopefully remedied. Back to this. Anyway, I just think it's so important to really control your illustration and make it the best illustration for what you're trying to showcase. And breaking rules of reality and making things just make sense for you and the viewer, because ultimately nobody's going to care if it makes sense realistically or fundamentally. That's like an artist's problem. Like artists might think about that or whatever. The average person who's taking in your work is just going to see an illustration that either works and they don't know why it works, or it doesn't work and they don't quite understand why they don't like it. It's like, but they're not going to be super critical of that stuff and they don't really know. It's like, it's just, is it cool? Does this make sense? All right. You can't be so beholden to, academic sides of working something up. You can definitely train so long in the fundamentals that you forget that your imagination is a muscle that you also need to flex and figure out. As after all, it's a creative job. Got to get creative. Break rules, figure stuff out. I mean, that's mostly what you're doing, right? It's like you're learning all the rules of a thing so that you can forget those rules and have them live in the back of your brain so that they're kind of subconsciously always there, but you're not so rigid in how you approach everything that you're constantly beholden to them. Like I've said this before, but I always think it's very apt comparison where it's, you don't want to be thinking about, like I think David Allen said this. He's like one of these work ethic guru guys, but he said something about how when you're getting attacked in an alley, it's too late to train. But I just think like that's very accurate for this sort of thing. It's like you do all the studies you do so that you can kind of throw that all away and have it become instinctual. just something that's in the back of your mind. But you don't want to be so present with that type of approach that you lose the fun of your imagination when you're creating an illustration, like or lean into the cartoony and weird. Like if I look at artists like Paul Bonner, who's a personal favorite of mine, Paul Bonner's work, if you're curious who this is, Paul and then Bonner, Bonner. Paul Bonner's work is very realistic in a sense, going by lighting and forms and just how everything interacts in the what feels like a very like realistic space. There's also a ton of caricature, exaggeration, and like playfulness in there that's not realistic in any sense. It's using the fundamental rules of realism and building up forms in a painting and all that type of stuff, but it's breaking those rules when it best suits the illustration and bending anatomy and exaggerating things for effect and all of that. And I think that that type of work is the most successful to me, and especially when it comes to creating an identity for yourself. If you're too locked into the fundamental thing, then you can kind of just look like an academic painter, which isn't bad. But if you're somebody who works in illustration and you want something distinctive about what you do that separates you from everybody else, I feel like that type of signature comes from, at least in my opinion, it comes from the imaginative aspect of your work. It's what you bring to the table as you. It's your particular taste. It's how you do things, or what your brain thinks is interesting or cool. And it's not something that's easily, replicatable. Replicable? I don't know. I like how sometimes I'm just talking and I forget what words are. I have no idea. I'm like, are there real? Is there a word for this that I'm forgetting? But yeah, like it's very hard to mimic somebody's style in their signature thing, like who they are. I sort of think of it like a playlist, right? You could say somebody has good taste in music. Be like, but you can't replicate that. Like you can listen to the same stuff they listen to, but if somebody's really into music and they love a bunch of different genres for very specific reasons, or it's related to emotional things for them, or it just makes them feel a certain way while they're working or whatever, like it's so particular to that individual. And I feel like those types of things are hard to kind of nail down. It's like you can't really replicate that because so much of it is based on how you grew up, your personal tastes in things, like so much, like the time period in which you grew up. There's so many variables there that change and so much nuance. And I feel like that's the same exact thing for style. Like that's why it's so hard to mimic somebody. Like I remember thinking like people would say like Boris Vallejo was like Frank Frazetta clone. But to me, Boris was like, this is going to sound so mean, and I don't mean it to at all, because there's definitely space for Boris. But Boris to me was like AI is now, where it feels similar to the artist it's trying to replicate, but it has this strange focus on like rigid fundamental ideas that it doesn't give room to human feeling and like exaggeration in the sense where it pushes and pulls anatomy for effect, and it has like very individual touches to it that make it feel distinct and different from other people. Like Frank Frazetta has a very signature look to the energy in his work, and just the way he does forms, and the choices are very specific to that one person. Where Boris is it's almost like if you took Frazetta And again, my own personal opinion, and I'm not knocking Boris, because there's definitely a place for that artist and whatever. But to me personally, it's like you took the fun out of Frank Frazetta and you just turned it like academic, which is like the problem to me of trying to mimic somebody else's style. Because like you can try and try and try, but that secret sauce of what makes that person special, it's too nuanced. You can get close, but you'll never be them. And that's the thing that's going to separate you from everybody. And you have to trust that that's in you. You have to trust that your lived experiences, who you are, everything you like, all of that is particular to you. And then you just need to get your skill level to a place where that shines through. And yeah, I mean, I tend to think of like approaches in art and all of it in taste and whatever style. It's like people will dislike it or it'll be wrong until it's so good that it's right and it's the new thing that everybody wants to be. I've seen that so much. You never want to listen to those people who say things like that. So yeah, I'm just continually rendering things up. I've just been using the same brush this whole process, just kind of touching everything, painting in highlights and outlines and trying to get the most out of this illustration. You can see how much ground I've covered just in this small span of time. Compare that to the chunk we just watched in Photoshop, and it's kind of shocking. Like it's shocking to think that I spend so much time in Photoshop just trying to make it work when I can do this in Krita in like 20 minutes. Like, God damn it. God damn it. Krita, get more features, please. Then I won't have to use Photoshop. That would be amazing. I'm still looking for that one program to eradicate Photoshop from my workflow. For a lot of people, that's Procreate, but man, you can't do huge files on there, especially for the kind of jobs I get. I have to do gigantic files. And I need the desktop version. I can't just work on an iPad. That's crazy. I'm working on a 32-inch screen right now, painting. I have that Cintiq Pro 32-inch. What am I gonna do? Throw this thing out? No way. So yeah, right now I'm just looking things over, making sure that everything's there, that I want to be there. I was able to get a lot done in Krita for this. And by the way, there's this whole PSD is going to be available for you to check out. So feel free to download that. I'm not sure as of this recording, me sitting here right now, how that's broken up. It might be two separate PSDs, I guess, that have the layers chunked together. So there'll probably be two PSD downloads, like a Knuckles Part 1 and Knuckles Part 2 PSD. Then you'll be able to look through all the layers there. Because as you can see, I keep them all intact for you all. I also got into the habit of making sure in all of my work that everything's separated, because you never know. You just never know. Let this be a lesson to anybody out there who wants to be an illustrator or is an illustrator and just starting out, or even if you've been doing it and you just haven't been asked yet. I promise you, getting into the habit of making sure that your selections are still in place in the final illustration is going to save you a ton of time when it comes to dividing up all the characters in your paintings so that they can be used individually, because I promise you, you're going to run into a client, usually like big game studios or whoever, they're going to want everything separated. They're going to want that. You will run into that situation where they go, "Oh, this is awesome. Your illustration's great. Do you have everything on separate layers so we can do animatics of the thing so that we can take this character outside of here for modeling so that we can do X, Y, and Z, whatever?" It's like that will happen to you. I promise. Okay, so now we're back in Photoshop. I'm using my airbrush here, just playing with soft light layers, adding that kind of warm or like hot pink soft light at 30% opacity around the lightning there. Want to make sure that that's popping. This character's getting more and more saturated as we go. Perfect. And then I just select areas like a dark red there and then just knock back some of those shadows more. Yeah, you can see that. The classic thing, I haven't even said it yet, but just in case there's anybody here watching who's never seen any other videos talk about this, I always flip the canvas horizontal over and over again. Just going, if you have like a version of Photoshop allows you to do this, I think all the later versions do. I use CS6 forever and you couldn't do this, but you can go to view and then flip horizontal. Stuff like that. It's just easy to reset your brain, look at it a bit differently, see all the problems that are there, and then adjust accordingly. Now I'm doing a radial blur on that background texture I just added. Again, just something like really dumb and quick to um, make this a finished illustration. That's pretty much it. I just want to make sure that the eye is focused on my knuckles there in the center. So I'm just creating a speed blur, zooming into the character just to say, hey, look right here. Pew! Look how fast you're looking right here. Look at all these dumb lines. Soft light, soft brush there to erase out some of those textures. Then I believe I do like a warp speed type of thing with a bunch of dotted textures. Maybe I do like a splattered toothbrush look or something. Or maybe this is it. I'm not sure. This might just be it. So there we are, just adjusting colors for the whole character here. Pulling things around, adjusting the reds, seeing if I can lean more magenta, more yellow, maybe blue, playing with everything. Just making sure that we're figuring it out, what could or couldn't be the final colors. Just seeing if there's anything better. It's always fun to do final adjustments. My general rule of thumb is if I'm doing something that's kind of like a pop illustration type thing, where it's like a video game character or something like that, contrast is really key. If the contrast is looking good, the character's really popping off the screen, that's typically better. Like if you ask the average person and you go, what do you like better, this one or this one? And one of them has more contrast, they're going to go, oh, that one, the one with more contrast. Not that that's always the right decision to make, but a lot of the times it is. That's sometimes the main reason why something doesn't work is because of a lack of contrast. This is me playing with that line layer again just to see if it looks good at all. I think ultimately I just turn it off. Just looking at it over and over like, is this a good idea? Is it not a good idea? I'm hoping that I didn't keep that in this final, because that's going to be a problem. See that stupid line under his arm there that's up like this? It's over top all of the lightning. I might have been going way too fast to notice that. If that's in the final file, I promise you I'll turn it off. And that won't be there. I added in some dotted texture around the lightning there. And then I just added a outer glow, which is a blend there. Blend mode on the layer. Just erasing out some of the dotted texture. And now I'm adding in a glow with my airbrush. I have it set to 20% opacity. Wherever there's a hot white light or some sort of glow going on, that's where I'm bumping it up. And I don't believe I kept that outline. If I did, I'm going to go turn it off. But there's not much time left in this video, so I don't think I do. That's a problem. Anyway, thanks for watching this. I'll skip back to an earlier part of the video here, just so I can talk to you while looking at this. Thanks for watching this. I hope that was helpful. That's been my whole process here for the past couple months, starting in this black and white phase where I sketch everything in charcoal style, changing it to this yellow tone, adding values, getting deeper in the values, ultimately rendering things out in Clip Studio. You can see that kind of before and after. So like that versus where I left off in Krita, right? I think here. So it's pretty dramatic. A lot of nuance. And then all the changes I do in Photoshop, ultimately leading back to Krita, ending in Photoshop. It's like, it's not too bad. It's a quick, pretty concise process. If you're not used to working in multiple styles, I get that it's maybe not natural to kind of hop between a bunch of different things, but once you get into the flow of it, I mean, all these programs are compatible with PSDs. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's just that, I mean, really, there are certain things that have an issue. Like if you try and bring over something with like selective color adjustment layers and that type of thing, if you bring that over into Clip Studio, you will lose information in there, and those color adjustments won't come over into that program. So you kind of have to do the thing that I do, where you either flatten bits of your image to do paint overs in those programs, or just like I do, use those programs earlier on in your process and then use Photoshop after the fact, and then go back into those programs again once you've done all your adjustments and do your final paintings. There's a bunch of different workarounds for it, but for where I'm at right now, with the things that I've learned about all these programs and what I find the most useful, this process has been the most beneficial for me. And I hope that you're able to get something out of this. And if this seems like something you're interested in, please give it a shot. Let me know how it goes. I would love to see your work. We have the Discord. You can always post in there, and try this approach out. If it's helpful to you and you get used to that Krita brush and things work, I imagine that you're going to find some success in it, because I genuinely can say that this has really changed things for me in such a positive way. It's hard to put into words, because honestly, like before this, I was struggling for a while and everything felt haphazard. It didn't feel like I could really get across to a client like a realistic deadline, because I wasn't exactly sure how long something would take me, because I didn't have a process that I felt like was measurable. But now that I do, I feel very confident again. I feel in control of my artwork, and I can't put a dollar sign on that. I mean, it's an invaluable feeling to feel like I'm not at odds with all this stuff and feeling out of my mind working on everything. So yeah, thanks as always for hanging out with me, for watching this. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the comments on this Patreon post. And I will talk to you all soon. I'll see you later.